Egyptian archaeologists made an extraordinary discovery near Cairo just recently. Drumroll, please. The most ancient and most complete mummy yet discovered in the country. Yes, they were keeping it under wraps. The 4,300-year-old mummy was found in a group of tombs close to the step pyramid of Djoser, dating back to the Egyptian Old Kingdom. It was covered in layers of gold. The team also found several other tombs, including one belonging to an ancient Egyptian official and another belonging to a secret keeper who had the power to perform special ceremonies. Another interesting tomb was that of a writer, which featured the largest statues ever found in the area. This vast burial site is also home to more than a dozen pyramids and resting grounds. Probably one of the most famous mummies in the world is that of Hatshepsut. She ruled Egypt like a boss for around 20 years, building all sorts of impressive buildings and creating new trade routes. But when archaeologist Howard Carter found her tomb in the Valley of the Kings, her sarcophagus was empty. However, Carter did find 2 coffins in another tomb, one of which belonged to Hatshepsut's wet nurse and the other to an unknown woman. In 2006, a team of specialists decided to investigate whether that mysterious lady was the queen herself. They found a molar tooth in a wooden box with Hatshepsut's name on it, and when they compared it to a gap in the mummy's mouth, it was a perfect match. Ramses II was a pretty impressive ruler, but it was his mummy that eventually made history. Now, we don't hear too much about his daddy. Okay, I'll stop. Ramses is considered to be the most powerful pharaoh in all of Egypt, as he reigned for a whopping 6 decades. He also lived to be over 90 years old. Now that's pretty amazing, considering the time he lived in. Ramses II supposedly had over 100 offspring too. Talk about a big family. When he passed away, his body was originally buried in the Valley of the Kings, but some sneaky guys tried to rob his tomb of all his treasures. Officials back in the day weren't having any of that though, so they moved his body to a secret location to keep it safe. Fast forward to the 1800s, and Ramses II's mummy was discovered along with a bunch of other rulers and important officials. But it wasn't in the best condition, so archaeologists flew it to Paris to get it, pampered. Problem was, he couldn't just be transported into another country. The only solution available was to give Ramses II his own passport. His occupation was listed as king, and the document even featured his photo. Most mummies aren't necessarily known for having the most hydrated skin. But that of an ancient woman, also known as Lady Di, proves otherwise. No, not that Lady Di. This wealthy lady from ancient times was discovered in an ornate tomb in 1971, and she looked fabulous, if we can say so about a mummy. Thanks to the special conditions in her tomb, like the moisture in the environment and the lack of oxygen, her body was almost perfectly preserved. Her skin was soft, her hair was on point, and she was still flexible. The museum that now proudly displays her mummy also shows a ton of fancy items that were buried with her, like dinnerware and musical instruments. Archaeologists investigated the mummy further and discovered that she passed away from a heart attack at around 50 years old. Even though it hasn't been around for over 2,000 years, Lady Di is still making history. The mummy of Otzi the Iceman was discovered in the Alps in 1991. Austrian authorities initially thought he was a modern mountaineer because he was so well preserved. Turns out, he was actually from the Copper Age. He was found in a mountain pass over 10,000 feet above sea level. Through studying his mummy, we've learned so much about life in Copper Age Europe. For example, we know that he was a native of Central Europe and enjoyed eating meat. He also suffered from arthritis, narrowing arteries, and intestinal problems. But he likely used acupuncture and medicinal herbs to treat these conditions. And apparently, he was pretty handy with tools. He sharpened them just days before his untimely demise. Who knows if he was expecting trouble or just getting ready for some routine work. Now, King Tut and his story is most likely the one that made all mummies famous. This pharaoh passed away at the young age of 19, more than 3,000 years ago. But his mummy is still one of the most well-known in the world. When his tomb was opened in 1922, people went wild because it was still intact, unlike many other royal tombs. It had some seriously blinged-out coffins, including one made of solid gold. Not only did Tut's tomb give us a glimpse into ancient Egyptian history, but his mummy also taught us a lot about the time he lived in. DNA analysis helped identify his parents and revealed that the pharaoh had a rare bone disorder that might have made walking a bit tough. Now, Ginger is most likely one of the coolest mummies you'll ever hear about. He's like a time traveler from 5,000 years ago who's still looking fly with his golden hair and perfectly preserved nails. Ginger was discovered in Egypt and is believed to be the earliest known mummified body. Before people even knew about mummification, they used to place bodies in shallow graves in the hot, dry sand. And since the sand absorbed all the water, bacteria couldn't reproduce and the body was preserved naturally. Now, scientists are not sure if Ginger's preservation was intentional or not, but since he was buried with some pottery vessels, it's likely that whoever buried him knew some serious preservation techniques. If you want to meet Ginger in person, he's currently chilling at the British Museum. One Dutch art collector bought a statue from Asia and ended up finding a weird discovery. The statue contained a mummy hidden inside. Unfortunately, the body was too fragile to move, so they had to leave it there. The coolest part is that this mummy is over 1,000 years old and was on display for 200 years before being encased in the statue. When scientists did a CT scan, they found out that the mummy was filled with paper scraps covered in writings. Experts think he might have done this thing called self-mummification, which is a pretty intense process involving a special diet and tea that makes your body less prone to bacteria. Only a few people could handle this ritual, and those who managed to do that were seriously respected. No other Egyptian queen has baffled scientists and historians like the stunning Nefertiti. Based on her statues, she was known for her slender neck, wide eyes, and high cheekbones. Her name translates to "the beautiful woman has come." Talk about living up to your name, huh? Even though she wasn't a pharaoh herself, Nefertiti still managed to leave a lasting impression. Written records suggest that, as a wife and queen, she held an incredibly influential role. Because of her power, she was indeed admired, but she also managed to make quite a lot of enemies throughout her life. She was also related to King Tut, but not biologically. Rather, she was his stepmother. So far, locals have yet to identify her mummy, but that may soon change. A local Egyptologist who has been busy excavating tombs in the Valley of the Kings has found two mummies that he believes could be Nefertiti and her daughter. According to specialists, we may soon finally get a definitive answer about the identity of these two mummies. And if one of them does turn out to be Nefertiti, we could be in for a real treat. DNA analysis and CT scans of the mummy could give us the most complete and accurate image of the queen that we've ever seen. It's crazy to think that we've only scratched the surface of what lies beneath modern-day Egypt. Nefertiti ruled during a time of great power and prosperity in Egypt, but unfortunately passed away in a period of social turmoil, leading to her gravesite being lost. Now, where's my mummy? For more than 3,000 years, the gold mask of Pharaoh Tutankhamun stayed hidden in the Valley of the Kings. This artifact, which stands about 21 inches tall, shows how skilled and artistic the ancient Egyptians were. But nobody expected that X-rays would reveal its biggest secret. King Tut was the last ruler of his family during the 18th dynasty. He took the throne at just 9 years old, but ruled for only 10 years before he passed away unexpectedly. If we're being honest, back in ancient Egypt, he was mostly forgotten by the rulers who came after him. His tomb wasn't a big deal for them, so much so that even the grave robbers forgot about him. It might sound a bit sad, but the truth is that it was actually great news for us. Since his tomb was practically forgotten, it ended up being perfectly preserved. While the other tombs in the Valley of the Kings were looted, his remained sealed and untouched. So, when it was discovered back in 1922, it had over 5,000 precious objects inside. That made Tutankhamun basically an instant celebrity and one of the best-known pharaohs nowadays. Among the treasures was the most stunning piece, his golden mask. This mask is said to be an exact image of the king's face, or at least it was supposed to be, but we'll get to that later. The purpose of this accurate representation of his face was to make sure that his soul would recognize him in the afterlife and return to his mummified body. In ancient Egyptian beliefs, this would allow him to continue living in the afterlife. The details of the mask clearly looked incredibly difficult to create, but people didn't realize how complex it truly was until many years later. The first X-rays of the mask were taken in 1967. Back then, the main reason for these scans was practical – conservation. The mask was heading to Paris for an exhibition, and it was the first time it had ever left Paris. This would help them keep track of any changes during the exhibit. Plus, the images could give clues about how the mask was made, but back then, they probably didn't fully realize just how complex its construction was. I mean, Egyptian goldsmiths didn't use modern soldering techniques. So, how did they make this mask? New X-rays taken in 2007 gave us some answers. It turned out the Egyptians didn't use pure gold, which is 24 carats. The mask was actually made of 23-karat gold, meaning it was mixed with another material. So specialists discovered that the gold sheets contained a small amount of copper, a reddish-brown metal. This was likely done to make the material more flexible and easier to shape. They would then shape the gold sheets by heating and hammering them over and over again. But there was one more secret inside the mask that wasn't discovered until 2015. The year before, the staff at Cairo's Egyptian Museum were working on the mask display when the long beard of the mask accidentally got knocked off. Another theory is that the beard had become loose over time and just fell off. Either way, the fact that King Tut's beard came off caused a lot of stress. After all, we're talking about one of Cairo's biggest tourist attractions, so the experts had to fix the problem quickly. The restoration process started with a detailed recording of the mask's condition. To do this, they had to take a full three-dimensional scan of the artifact. And, by accident, they found something very interesting in the mask. Inside the royal beard, there is a gold tube, an intriguing structure that the Egyptians likely used to attach the beard to the rest of the mask. And that proved, once again, that the process of making this mask was even more complex than experts thought. But the mysteries don't stop there. Remember how we mentioned that the mask was thought to perfectly represent King Tutankhamun's face? Well, that might not be entirely true. Some popular theories suggest the mask was never meant for him and was actually made for someone else. A study published in 2015 suggested the mask was originally made for a female pharaoh, his supposed stepmother, the famous and beautiful Egyptian queen Nefertiti. The biggest clue comes from an inscription on the mask. At first glance, it seemed to belong to Tutankhamun, but after a close examination, researchers noted that something else was actually written underneath King Tut's name. The royal name stamp seems to have been altered, and originally it had something written on it that translates to Queen Nefertiti. There is another feature of King Tut's golden mask that was overlooked for years, which adds even more mystery. As we mentioned earlier, experts believe he wasn't respected much by the pharaohs who came after him. And one of the clues that made archaeologists think this is the pierced ears on the mask. Some researchers believe that King Tutankhamun wouldn't have worn earrings after he was a kid. So, according to their theory, by the time he passed away at 18, he shouldn't have been represented with pierced ears. This could also support the idea that the mask originally belonged to Nefertiti, or maybe to someone who wasn't even connected to King Tut. But the mask isn't the only source of mystery. In fact, his whole tomb is full of puzzles. Recently, historians found a sign that the place where King Tut was supposed to be buried was changed at the last minute. For years, experts wonder why a pharaoh who ruled for 9 years ended up in such a simple tomb. When compared to the grandeur of other pharaohs' tombs, his tomb seemed, well, a bit plain. The idea that a king like Tutankhamun would have such an unremarkable resting place just doesn't match up with the power and importance he must have had in ancient Egypt. So, what happened? Well, apparently, this might have something to do with his successor, Pharaoh I. After King Tutankhamun passed away, researchers believe that I made sure to erase him from Egypt's history. So, one theory suggests that he was probably behind the quick decision to place King Tut's body in a smaller, less impressive tomb. When experts looked at I's own tomb, they found something interesting. There is a large wall covered in painted baboons. This is the same type of artwork found in Tutankhamun's tomb. It seems like the same person might have chosen the artwork for both tombs. Now, the design and decoration of the two tombs are almost identical, suggesting there was a shared hand behind both. But there is one key difference. I's tomb is fit for a king. It's much bigger and more impressive, even though the style and artwork are similar to what you see in Tutankhamun's tomb. So the theory suggests that I decided what went into both tombs. Since Tut passed away unexpectedly at a young age, his grand tomb wasn't finished in time. Normally, pharaohs start building their tombs while they're still alive to make sure everything is perfect. But Tut passed away when he was just 18, so there wasn't enough time. I may have taken advantage of the situation, ordering a smaller tomb for Tut and keeping a larger one for himself. Experts believe this theory explains why Tutankhamun's tomb is so simple and how I managed to wipe his memory from history so easily. But in the end, the story of King Tut's mask and tomb is full of mystery and intrigue. Each new discovery sheds more light on what really happened all those years ago. But one thing is for sure, the secrets of ancient Egypt still have much to reveal, and King Tutankhamun will continue to fascinate people for years to come.
Let's face it, most ancient tombs have been looted at least once. No matter how scary the rumors could have been, most mummies were open too. But one. This is the Bashiri mummy, and it puzzles everyone so much that nobody dares to see what's inside. Meet Howard, but you must know him already if you're into Egyptian history. He's primarily famous for discovering King Tut's tomb back in 1922. But few people know that before this revolutionary discovery, he had probably found another mummy. It happened in 1919, and it goes by several names, either the Bashiri mummy or the Mummy of Pacheri, or the Untouchable One. Some reports say that Howard stumbled upon the Bashiri mummy in Luxor's Valley of the Kings, just where he would later find Tut's tomb. Despite this find, not much is known about this particular mummy. The reason why it's still unharmed in any way is not because of some superstitions, but because nobody is sure that they can undo what they do if something goes wrong. The mummy is so intricately wrapped that researchers never unfurled it for fear of irreversible damage. The golden rule of anyone who works with antiquities: if you're not sure you can't make it better or preserve it unchanged, do not touch it. History knows many examples of ancient relics ruined beyond repair, say Ecce Homo, or smiling statue restoration. The delicate fabric that covers the mummy's face has this cool design that kind of looks like a pyramid. The researchers are not 100% sure, but this might be the only one of its kind with that embalming style. But without knowing the ancient technique, it's next to impossible not to ruin the mummy while unwrapping and wrapping it back. Back in the day, people, both experts and looters, would unwrap mummies for all sorts of reasons, mostly to study them. Luckily, these days, we have advanced tech that lets us check out what's inside a sarcophagus without having to unwrap anything. After taking a closer look at the Bashiri mummy, researchers figured out that it belonged to a man who was around 5.5 feet tall and lived during the Ptolemaic era, which makes this mummy roughly 2,300 years old. The Egypt Museum shared that the X-ray scan also uncovered an inscription of the guy's name, but it's a bit tricky to tell if it says Pacheri or Nenu, adding to the intrigue. The museum also pointed out that the fancy casing the mummy is in features all sorts of decorated scenes. You can see the mummy lying on a bed, flanked by deities Isis and Nephthys, along with the 4 sons of Horus. Plus, there are 2 images of the funerary god Anubis at the feet of the casing. By the way, Bashiri mummy is not the only one that has remained untouched. This is Issa Temkebde, and Gaston Maspero, a French archaeologist, made the decision to leave her mummy untouched, wanting to keep her resting peacefully since she was in such amazing shape. He did mention, though, that her tomb had been raided long ago. Thanks to some X-ray work, we learned more about the mummy. The scans revealed a few artifacts still wrapped up with the wife of a high priest, including amulets around her neck, right arm, and forehead. The X-rays also showed she had some dental issues and arthritis in her knees. While she passed away as an older woman, it's tough to pinpoint her exact age. However, various sources from her son's reign indicate that she was held in high regard in the kingdom. Isitemkebd served as the sister wife of Penejam II. You got me right, they were related by blood and were siblings, but back then it was pretty common to get married this way to preserve the purity of the bloodline. Say that to Habsburg, duh. Their chase for purity only led to inbreeding and the notorious Habsburg's jaw. Right, I guess we should not judge ancient Egyptian rules and morals, but what we can say for sure is that both Bashiri and Isitemkebd were incredibly lucky to stay untouched. The odds were not in King Tut's favor, though. The researchers' work hit him hard. The tomb itself was discovered in 1922, but it wasn't until 1925 that the nested coffins were opened during an excavation. The outer coffin, held together with silver pins, opened up to show another coffin shaped like a mummy, decorated with colorful glass and flower garlands. There were worries about the king's mummy because it had been exposed to moisture. The middle coffin was pretty heavy and didn't have any handles, so they had to be super careful taking it out. Inside the innermost coffin, which was solid gold and wrapped in a red cloth, they found the royal mummy, and this all went down on October 28, 1925. Tutankhamun's mummy, measuring about 6.07 feet, fit snugly into the innermost coffin, which was 6.17 feet long. You can already tell there was a problem, right? Imagine how hard it is to extract something as fragile as an ancient dried-up mummy, especially when there's not much room for maneuver. Plus, the mummy looked sus. It was pitch black. Howard Carter, the lead archaeologist of the expedition, estimated that around 2 buckets worth of oils had been poured over the mummy. But care had been taken to avoid the mask and feet. It was made to preserve him better. The body was positioned at a slight angle in the coffin, and there was a noticeable difference in the amount of dark oils on the right and left sides, indicating that the coffin might have tilted while being lowered into the sarcophagus. This oil created moisture inside the coffins, and over time, it reacted chemically, which Carter described as a sort of slow, spontaneous combustion, leading to the carbonization of the linen wrappings. Unfortunately, the combination of heat and moisture took a toll on the mummy's trappings as well. The crooked flail fell apart, the resin scarab cracked, and the threads holding the hands and mummy's bands started to decay, making everything quite fragile. Plus, the oils hardened over the years, effectively gluing the mummy and mask to the coffin's bottom. To try and separate the mummy from the inner and middle coffins, they were placed in the sun for several hours, reaching temperatures of 149 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite this effort, the mummy remained stuck, so the initial examination had to be done right where it was. The first part of Tutankhamun's mummy the researchers checked out was his lower legs and feet, meaning they started the examination from the bottom up. As they peeled back the bandages, they uncovered the first of many treasures wrapped up with the king. They took their time to carefully document and photograph everything they found. The inner layers of bandages were in pretty bad shape, mostly turning to dust, making it tough to figure out how everything was originally wrapped. Still, the overall methods matched what was seen in other nobles' mummies from that time. Lots of folded linen pads were used to shape the torso and thighs. The outer and inner bandages were made from fine linen, while the middle layers were coarser. They had some intricate bandaging around the shoulders and chest with a similar style around the groin. Each limb, along with fingers and toes, which were fitted with gold caps, was wrapped separately. Tutankhamun even wore gold foil sandals on his feet. They hoped to separate the mummy from the coffin by removing the outer bandages, but the resins had stuck the body to the coffin. So, the researchers ended up chiseling it out. To do this, they had to cut the torso in half at the hips and disarticulate the arms to continue unwrapping. Each part was treated with hot paraffin wax for stability, and later the hands and feet were reattached with resin. Finally, they used hot knives to detach the head from the mask. To check the teeth, it was decided to make an incision around the jaw and neck, which was later fixed with resin. So technically, the scientists did all they could to preserve the mummy, but still, in a way, it ended up being damaged beyond repair. What do you think? Should they have left it in the coffin? Or did they do the right thing? Let us know in the comments. We all know some iconic symbols. The Statue of Liberty screams USA. The Eiffel Tower represents Paris. And this mask? Undoubtedly, it's Tutankhamun's, right? Sometimes it feels like historians have squeezed every last drop out of the King Tut story. But guess what? The most obvious details often slip right under our noses. Like the fact that this famous mask didn't actually belong to him, nor was it ever meant for him. Stick with me for the details. Can we get a close-up of that mask? Thanks. See those holes? Yep, they're for earrings. And no, it's not that they had anything against jewelry, but back in ancient Egypt, earrings were typically worn by high-status women or kids. Now, if you know your history, you might say, but Tut was a boy king, wasn't he? You're spot on. He began his reign at just 9 years old. Sadly, that didn't last long as he passed away at a very young age. So when he was 9, he might have worn earrings, but he probably took them off when he hit that no earrings age. Sounds reasonable, right? Actually, not quite. That would have been pretty strange since nobody expected him to pass away young. Certainly not at 9. So no one was preparing a kid's mask for a burial. It's this untimely demise that suggests the mask used was simply the best option available when Tut passed away. There are more clues pointing to the idea that the mask was found in a hurry. Let's think about this. Even though Tut was mummified and his body could wait a bit, his loved ones wanted him to reach the afterlife ASAP. Some experts even believe the paint in the tomb was still wet when it was sealed. But look at his mask. It's a masterpiece. There's no way it was made in a rush. It's way more elaborate than other simpler cartonnage pieces. The renowned mask of King Tut stands 21 inches tall, adorned with precious stones, and features a golden beard that weighs 5.5 pounds, making the entire mask 22.5 pounds. Okay, I'm a bit confused here. So it seems like it was probably a kid's mask, but it had a beard? I've never seen a 9-year-old with a goatee, and I'm guessing you haven't either. Just think about it. A grown man's face compared to a kid's face. Fun fact for you, our faces pretty much stopped growing at the age of 16, so by 19, Tut would have definitely had the face of an adult man. Can you imagine trying to fit a relatively small kid's mask on a grown man? That would have been super embarrassing, and no one would have let that happen. Right, let's dismiss the kids' theory. Now, the second option, if you remember, is that the mask could have originally belonged to a woman. This is where the beard theory comes into play. Some researchers believe the beard might have been added later on. Here's another twist. What if the mask was actually made for Nefertiti herself, who ended up maskless? In this case, there are two discoveries. Two birds with one stone. For now, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, I know. But let's give it a shot and delve deeper into the details. So, Tut passed away in around 1323 BCE, probably due to malaria. He had other health issues too, like when he broke his leg, and records suggest he wasn't in the best shape. As for Nefertiti, we have no solid data about her demise. Plus, nobody knows exactly when or where she was buried. The supposed year when she passed away is around 1330 BCE, but she could have lived longer, and the mask was intended and prepared for her. Or maybe they just took her mask right from the burial chamber. After all, they were family. Well, sort of. She was said to be his stepmom, having been married to Akhenaten, who was likely Tut's father. But this is not 100% accurate. Some scientists doubt it. Ah, these ancient Egyptian families. It's hard to keep track of who's who. I know, you're not yet convinced that Tut wore a lady's mask. Let me share one more theory with you. Meet Howard Carter, the enthusiastic archaeologist who discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. It was located in the Valley of Kings outside Luxor and, to everyone's surprise, was nearly intact. When he entered, he noticed something odd. This didn't feel like a pharaoh's burial chamber. It was classy and all, but it had a vibe that suggested it was made for a woman. Typically, Egyptian pharaohs had larger tombs that suited them better, and even more strangely, it was oriented to the right of the entrance. This didn't add up. That orientation was typical for female chambers, which Egyptian queens used. Another red flag was that the chamber appeared to have been built in stages, and all the artifacts, around 2,000 of them, seemed hastily placed there. Even more curious, they looked like they were meant for other royals. Carter discovered this burial site in 1922, but it remained a mystery as to why it was so bizarre. Almost a century later, Nicholas Reeves thought he may have solved the puzzle. He claimed that King Tut might not have been the original resident of the tomb. Instead, he suggested that the undisturbed resting place of the legendary Queen Nefertiti could be hidden behind the walls of the boy king's burial chamber. Nicholas studied high-resolution photos for months, meticulously examining every pixel. One day, he focused on detailed scans that revealed the texture of the tomb's walls beneath layers of paint. He spotted what he believed to be outlines of two doorways that had been blocked and plastered over to hide them from view. The more he looked, the more it seemed real. Could it be a tomb within a tomb? Nicholas theorized there was a hidden storeroom behind the western wall of King Tut's tomb, and his chamber might just be the outermost section of a larger corridor-style network of rooms. It all sounds fancy, but sorry to break it to you, Reeves' theory was debunked. To find out if he was onto something, experts had to use ground-penetrating radar to see the unseen. Reeves' idea was that if there were gaps, it could indicate the presence of additional rooms. And at first, in 2015, one expert even thought he had found a hidden room. But the glory didn't last for long. A year later, after double-checking, it turned out there were no hidden doorways. By the way, Nefertiti isn't the only legendary woman from Egypt whose burial site remains a captivating mystery. There's a cool legend about Cleopatra that you might enjoy. It's said that she once declared, "No man will ever find my tomb." Kind of fitting, right? After all, the person who's come closest to uncovering her final resting place is a woman. Fast forward a few millennia after she passed away, and while no man has located it, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez believes she might have cracked the code. She's been on the quest for Cleopatra VII's tomb for nearly 20 years, and recently discovered a bust that she thinks represents the famous queen. However, not everyone is on board with her claim. Some experts argue that the bust doesn't resemble Cleopatra at all. Alongside this intriguing marble statue, Martinez's team also unearthed 337 coins, some of which, less controversially, feature Cleopatra's likeness. But the real part is that it's still not officially confirmed. There's no doubt about the existence of the small bust. It's carved from white marble, fits in one hand, and shows a woman wearing a royal crown, according to a translated statement from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. The big question, though, is who it actually depicts. While Martinez insists this statue is a representation of Queen Cleopatra VII, many other archaeologists argue that the facial features don't match, suggesting it likely belongs to a princess instead. Sorry, I can't resist the temptation of breaking the magic for a moment. Some folks believe that the whole idea of "no man will find my tomb" is misunderstood. Even if she did say it, what she probably meant was "no living soul," and it wasn't about gender at all. It can as well be just a beautiful legend. Toodaloo!
So looky here, scientists discovered ancient artifacts near King Tut's tomb. Turns out, his VIP final resting place looks more like a public graveyard with about a dozen wooden coffins that's been there for around 3,600 years. Okay, I might have exaggerated a tad. The 11 tombs weren't exactly right next to King Tut, but they were close, near the same city of Luxor. New findings in Egyptian tombs can help us piece together what life was like in ancient Egypt. And guess what? Ancient Egyptians seem to have been remarkably like us, modern humans. Say, the women have always loved jewelry, and archaeologists retrieved a beautifully made necklace with 30 amethyst beads and 2 agate beads, plus a hippo head amulet. Bet it was all the rage back then. Researchers also discovered 2 copper mirrors. One had a handle shaped like a lotus, and the other was decorated with Hathor, the ancient Egyptian deity of the sky, women, fertility, and love. These recent excavations near Tutankhamun's burial site led to another jaw-dropping revelation. For the first time in thousands of years, fragments of Queen Hatshepsut's Valley Temple were uncovered. This fearless woman was thought to be the second female pharaoh, who ruled with both courage and wisdom, leaving a legacy as solid as the stones themselves. Her temple, hidden for ages, opens a window into a time filled with power, intrigue, and spiritual devotion. Archaeologists found over 1,000 beautifully decorated stone blocks on the outskirts of Hatshepsut's funerary temple. There were very few women who managed to take the throne in ancient Egypt. Another tomb was found nearby, and it belonged to the overseer of Queen Teti Sheri's palace, whose name was Jehuti-Mez. Queen Hatshepsut seems to have even more tombs, aces up her sleeve. These tombs were carved into the rock instead of being built as pyramids, showing a unique ancient perspective on how to protect the soul in the afterlife. Experts managed to retrieve some cool ancient pieces from the site. Toys made of clay, mummy masks, winged scarabs, and some amulets. Sadly, there surely used to be way more artifacts, but over the last centuries, there have been people other than archaeologists to stumble upon this site. It's likely that looters got to these tombs before them and may have taken some valuable items. But they did leave behind some cool stuff for the researchers, like pottery used for offerings of bread and meat, along with archers' bows that connect the tomb's owners to the Egyptian military. Meanwhile, soul protection is way more important than you might think, especially if you're roaming around Luxor looking for ancient secrets. You aren't scared of King Tut's curse, are you? Let me tell you what happened to those who weren't scared, but promise me to take it with a dash of salt, okay? For years, Egyptologists, especially those who believed in paranormal activity, were convinced that there was an unsettling curse surrounding Tutankhamun's archaeological discoveries. This belief stemmed from the mysterious and untimely demise of several excavators who discovered the tomb in 1922 with no logical explanation for why they passed away. It was just easier to chalk it up to something supernatural and avoid the whole mess. But it turns out it wasn't a curse at all. It was likely the radiation that caused those excavators to perish. Now, you might wonder where the radiation came from. After all, while radioactivity was discovered in the 19th century, ancient Egyptians, despite their impressive pyramids, didn't have any radium lying around to make Tut's tomb glow like crazy. So, what could be the real story? It might have been toxic waste behind it all. Toxic levels of radiation from uranium and hazardous waste have been lurking inside the tomb since it was sealed over 3,000 years ago. The burial chamber of Tutankhamun's tomb reportedly has such high radiation levels that anyone who steps inside could easily end up with a fatal dose of radiation sickness or an incurable condition. By the way, you can have a somewhat similar level of radioactivity if you don't get rid of those moldy dinner leftovers you left to perish in your fridge a month ago. But this radioactivity isn't exclusive to Tutankhamun's tomb. Ancient Egyptian artifacts discovery is rewarding yet dangerous due to unusually high radiation levels in Old Kingdom tombs all over Egypt. Geiger counters have detected radiation at 2 sites near the Giza pyramids, and radon, a radioactive gas, has been found in several underground tombs in Saqqara. Interestingly, Experts believe that the builders of these ancient tombs were aware of the toxins, as some eerie warnings were carved into the walls of many tombs. One inscription ominously declared, "They that break this tomb shall meet their end by a malady that no doctor can diagnose." Other ominous phrases like "forbidden," "due to evil spirits," only added to the fear that supernatural curses haunted these ancient sites. Ominous signs have stunned archaeologists since forever, but the fear grew even stronger a century ago with the mysterious passing of Lord Carnarvon, who funded King Tut's excavation in 1922 and reportedly explored the treasure-filled rooms, along with several others who entered the tomb. Arthur Weigall, another British Egyptologist who was present at the tomb's opening and is credited with starting the curse myth, passed away young when he was just in his 50s in 1934. Chances are the condition that made him pass was connected to radiation. In total, 6 out of the 26 people who were there when the tomb was opened met their end within a decade from various causes. Not only X-ray exposure, those reasons include asphyxia, stroke, heart failure, pneumonia, and even poisoning. Well, isn't this getting a little grim? There was one guy who opened the tomb and somehow managed to avoid the infamous curse, Howard Carter, or so it seemed. Some folks pointed to his survival as proof that the curse wasn't real. After digging up the tomb, Carter published several books on the topic and shifted gears from archaeology to dealing in antiquities for various museums. Despite dodging demise or injury, rumors swirled about how the curse may have impacted him in other ways. One of the big stories linked him to Lord Carnarvon's daughter, Evelyn. Some said he was madly in love with her, but she married someone else, so he chose to stay single. Others claim they had an affair while she was in Egypt, which ended when her father passed away and she left the country for good. However, there wasn't much evidence to support these stories. Evelyn was just 6 when they met, and they remained friends until his last breath. She was even one of the few attendees at his funeral, but denied any romantic involvement, saying they weren't that close. A year after the revolutionary discovery near King Tut's tomb, Evelyn married politician Sir Brograve Beauchamp and had a daughter. That same year, Beauchamp toured the tomb with his parents, guided by Carter himself. Carter never married and, aside from those posthumous rumors about Evelyn, had no other romantic connections. While the curse adds an intriguing twist to his life story, his tendency to keep relationships at arm's length was evident long before the tomb was opened. It seemed Carter just wasn't a people person. In 1939, after battling a serious illness, he ultimately succumbed to fate. He was 64, which was a pretty common life expectancy in the UK back then, so no one really thought it was off and linked it to an ancient curse. When he passed, it turned out he had several artifacts from Tutankhamun's tomb in his London apartment, which were eventually sent back to Egypt, marking what some viewed as the curse's end. Who knows? Maybe if he hadn't had all those ancient souvenirs at his place, he would have lived way longer. But all the other demises might seem off. The curse theory was likely fueled by some strange events during the excavation. Carnarvon got a mosquito bite that became severely infected, and around the time they opened the tomb, Cairo experienced a bizarre power outage and a freak sandstorm. Back in England, the Earl's dog, Susie, managed to escape from Carnarvon's house and began barking frantically at seemingly nothing. At least that's what the staff and family saw. Strangely enough, at the very moment her owner's heart stopped, Susie started howling and fell down without showing any signs of life. Maybe radiation didn't play a crucial role after all, and those were indeed ancient artifacts from King Tut's tomb that made them all perish. Spooky, huh?
You're digging in Egypt's famous Saqqara necropolis, also known as the ultimate VIP graveyard for pharaohs, when suddenly you find a giant pink door hiding something no one knew existed. Behind this giant stone door, one that wasn't supposed to open, by the way, you find a lost tomb of Egyptian royalty. Alright, history lovers, it's time to buckle up because archaeologists just pulled off something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie. let's travel all the way to Saqqara, one of Egypt's most mysterious and treasure-packed ancient sites. The star of the show? The prince you've probably never heard of, Prince Userefre, son of King Userkaf. No one important, just, the founder of Egypt's 5th dynasty. No big deal. But the way his tomb was discovered… It all started with a massive door, made of pink granite, no less. But this isn't just a regular stone slab. This thing is about 14 to 15 feet tall and 4 feet wide. A giraffe could easily walk through it. This door is also definitely heavier than your neighbor's SUV. But here's the twist. It wasn't a real door. It was a false door, a symbolic gateway meant to allow the spirit of the deceased to pass between the world of the living and the afterlife. Normally, that's where the story ends. After all, false doors are common in tombs. But this one was extra special. You see, false doors were usually made out of limestone, which was pretty common and found everywhere in Egypt. To build one out of red or pink granite, people had to bring these rocks from a quarry located 400 miles away. And you can bet this wasn't a cheap trip. According to Egyptologists, this is the first time a false door of this size and material has ever been found in Egypt, making it a totally unique piece of architecture. Aside from being super expensive, this one had a surprise behind it too. When the team of researchers investigated further, they realized that this false door actually hid a real entrance. And what did it lead to? A hidden tomb packed with statues, relics, and secrets from over 4,000 years ago. The tomb belonged to Prince Userefre, but you can call him Wasar Efra or Wasar Efra too. Despite being totally erased from history, this fella was no minor noble. The hieroglyphs on the pink granite door listed him as the hereditary prince, governor of Buto and Nekeb, royal scribe, minister, judge, and priest of chance. Phew! He was like the ancient Egyptian version of Daenerys Targaryen. These inscriptions not only identify his political and religious roles, but also suggest he held significant power in Lower and Upper Egypt, bridging both regions through his titles. One title in particular, the Priest of Sekher, links him to the deity of the necropolis, the one with the falcon head. This god was the patron of the living and god of the dead at the same time. So I guess the Forgotten Prince was sort of a big deal, considering that his tomb was placed in such a prestigious location within Saqqara. What's even more mysterious is that Prince Userefre doesn't appear in official king lists or royal family trees, which makes us wonder if he passed away before he could rule, or if his legacy was deliberately erased in one of ancient Egypt's classic political dramas. Some scholars now believe his erasure might be connected with shifting religious or political power struggles during the early 5th dynasty, especially as his father Userkaf was reshaping Egypt's religious order. And speaking of his father, King Userkaf was a total game changer. He wasn't just the founder of the 5th dynasty, he also kicked off a religious revolution by promoting the sun god Ra over older deities. That's right, Userkaf built the very first sun temple at Abu Sir, setting off a dynasty-wide obsession with solar worship. After Userkaf wrapped up his short but revolutionary reign, a whole lineup of pharaohs took the stage. Sahure, Nefertiti, Nusere-Ini, basically the boy band of the 5th dynasty. And these guys were all about two things: building pyramids and making money. They weren't just stacking stones, they were expanding Egypt's influence, opening up trade routes to far-off lands, and blinging out their temples like it was nobody's business. Back in the tomb, things got even cooler. There was a beautiful red granite offering table covered with inscriptions detailing ritual foods, like an eternal menu for the afterlife, because they believed the deceased could magically eat this food. Fun fact, it was the funerary priests and their families that actually ate the food. There were also pottery shards, amulets, and painted walls, but the real showstoppers were the statues. And this is exactly where things get weird, in a good way. The team found statues of King Djoser, the guy who built Egypt's first pyramid, his wife, and their 10 daughters, inside Prince Usarefre's tomb. Hold up. Djoser lived a few centuries before Usarkov. So what were his statues doing there? Turns out, scientists don't really know. These statues were built during the reign of King Djoser himself and probably belonged to that first ever built pyramid. Experts believe these statues were probably relocated during the 26th dynasty, thousands of years after Djoser, maybe to protect them from destruction, or maybe because they were still venerated. Basically, ancient Egyptians were hoarders, but classy ones. Scientists also know for a fact that some engravings and statues found there were made way later, which means that this tomb probably turned into a deposit for fancy stuff. Or maybe this was just really ancient interior decorating. Anyway, that wasn't all. There was another pink granite entrance on the eastern side of the tomb, with inscriptions linking back to King Nefertiti, another 5th dynasty pharaoh who also tried to build his own pyramid, but failed. And near this second entrance, archaeologists found something never seen before in Saqqara: a set of 13 pink granite statues, all sitting in a row on a high-backed bench, like they were waiting at the DMV of the afterlife. Some had elevated heads, probably representing the prince's wives, while others were missing their heads entirely. One black granite statue was found upside down. Maybe it had taken a tumble sometime during the tomb's long, quiet centuries underground. According to archaeologists, the positioning and head shapes suggest that these statues followed a strict social hierarchy, with the central figures likely representing higher status individuals, while the headless ones might indicate unfinished work or later vandalism. And speaking of black granite statues, another one was found standing proudly inside the tomb. Based on its design and inscriptions, it looks like it was placed there during the 26th dynasty, the same time those Djoser statues were probably moved in. This suggests the tomb didn't just sit abandoned, it was reused, adapted, and maybe even honored by later generations. And by the way, black granite was associated with Osiris, the god of the underworld, during the late period, which means that this statue's presence is a clue that the tomb was a ritual space long after the prince's death. All of this, giant granite doors, surprise statues, reused tombs, adds up to a truly thrilling find. Prince Usarefre may not be a household name yet, but his tomb is now one of the most fascinating ever found in Saqqara. It tells a story not just of the Old Kingdom, but of how ancient Egyptians kept connecting to their past, even thousands of years later. So, what does it all mean? Why hide a tomb behind a fake door? Why pack it with statues from different eras? And who exactly was Prince Usarefre? These are the kinds of mysteries that keep archaeologists digging and keep the rest of us fascinated. In the end, this discovery isn't just about one tomb, it's about how much is still waiting beneath the sands of Egypt. As more gets uncovered, we're reminded again and again that ancient history isn't gone. It's just sleeping behind massive pink granite doors. Scientists have discovered a never-before-seen pyramid immersed in the sands of Judea. After a little digging, they discovered that it held treasures that had been untouched for over 2 millennia and historical secrets that we can only now access. At the Zohar Fortress site, 2,600 feet above the Dead Sea, archaeologists were searching for manuscripts that would provide new information about the history of the site. The excavation was originally part of a long-standing campaign launched by the authorities. Its goal was to protect the sites from looting and unauthorized excavations. What they didn't expect was to find a pyramid-shaped structure built on top of a hill, made of hand-cut stones, each weighing hundreds of pounds. At first, the experts thought it was just a tomb, but they soon noticed the shape of the original walls and understood that the mound was a construction. They immediately realized that someone had dug into the top of the structure, probably looters who had spotted something valuable there. Luckily, most of the structure was still buried in sand, so the most valuable finds were hidden from sight. In the first week of excavation, volunteers found fragments of papyrus, bronze vases, and even ancient furniture, which were exceptionally well preserved. The desert climate had been a great ally in preserving those artifacts over the millennia. With little humidity in the air, mold cannot form. So, organic materials such as wood and fibers are protected from cracking and deformation. Hypotheses suggested that the pyramid had been built during the First Temple period. However, new discoveries have shown that it's more recent, from the Hellenistic period. Considering this and the fact that the structure dates back 2,200 years, it's believed that it probably appeared shortly after the death of Alexander the Great, the famous ancient Greek king of Macedonia. At that time, his generals divided the former Seleucid Empire. Ptolemy took control of Egypt and the surrounding regions, including the Dead Sea area, while Seleucus took control of the north, which is now part of the Middle East. It's still not known for sure whether the pyramid was built under the rule of the Ptolemaics or the Seleucids. Both Ptolemaic coins and coins from the Seleucid kingdom have been found at the site. Even so, many scholars believe it was built when the region was under Ptolemaic control. Evidence also suggests that the building, despite its longevity, collapsed at some point. But that's not why it was abandoned by the ancient Egyptians, which begs the question of what purpose it was built for. Some believe it was used as a tomb due to its picturesque location on top of a hill. Others believed it may have served as a historical monument. However, one of the strongest theories is that the pyramid was a guard tower, protecting an important trade route along which salt and bitumen resources from the Dead Sea were transported to coastal ports. They also believe it may have been used by Ptolemaic officials to collect taxes from travelers. It would be something equivalent to our modern-day toll booths, or even port inspection agencies. Although the contents of the papyrus documents remain a mystery, it seems very likely they were written using the Greek alphabet, and some experts believe that they may have been tax documents, which would make perfect sense, given the theory that the pyramid was a guard tower. The team calls it a fascinating historical mystery that the dig is helping to unravel, but the find is just a grain of sand in an entire desert. The dig is part of a larger project that's been going on for a long time. And in the last 8 years alone, it has scanned 111 miles of desert cliffs and identified approximately 900 caves within that radius. Using rappelling equipment, advanced technology, and specialized documentation methods, archaeologists discovered thousands of rare items, such as hidden scrolls, woodworking tools, carpets, leather goods, and even treasures. For them, the Judean desert is an ancient vault just waiting to be opened to reveal its secrets. A few years before they found the mysterious pyramid, they discovered a cave that had served as a refuge for Jewish rebels almost 1,900 years ago. The site was about 262 feet from the top of a cliff, and because of its difficult access, it hadn't been explored yet. Inside, they found previously unpublished fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls that contained religious passages written in Greek. 11 lines of text were reconstructed thanks to the good condition of the papyri. So, scientists were able to identify their etymological content. Probably the best thing, there was no problem with preservation. Thanks to the dry and hot conditions of the desert, the artifacts were in impeccable condition. And there were other historical treasures there. The teams found rare coins, a partially mummified skeleton over 6,000 years old, with skin, tendons, and even strands of hair. There was also a giant basket made of plant fibers, considered the oldest in the world, more than 10,000 years old. With a capacity of up to 26 gallons, it was made about 1,000 years before the invention of ceramics. Speaking of historical treasures, there's another one that has caught the attention of the scientific community. A small piece of fabric that is around 3,800 years old. But it's more than just simple fabric. Dyed with the rare scarlet paint mentioned many times in ancient religious texts, this find is the oldest known evidence of fabric painted with a dye made from insects, known as scarlet worms. This is where the intense red hue comes from. It was a highly valued color, like royal blue and purple, because those insects lived in oak trees and could only be harvested for a short period during the year. So, those dyes were reserved for sacred fabrics, such as priests' clothes, marking status and religious importance. And although this discovery had great significance for archaeology, its size was actually tiny, measuring less than 1 inch. The fragment was discovered in 2016 during excavations in the so-called Cave of Skulls, but it's not known exactly how this fabric got there. According to experts, it's evidence that people knew how to dye wool fibers already 3,800 years ago or so. It also provides us with proof that the ancient textile industry already used animals at about the same time people began to create written sources. Fabrics painted using this type of dye were recorded in more recent periods. But what makes this piece really special is the fact that it is much older than any other. Another important discovery was made in 1980, when scientists found a seed that was over 1,000 years old, which turned into a mysterious tree named Sheba. They spent 14 years cultivating this plant, which is now about 10 feet tall, only to discover later that it could belong to an extinct lineage of trees that had grown in the region. The seed dates back to a period between 993 and 1202 CE, and they believe that Sheba may be a biblical tree commonly associated with healing. Although it's not been possible to identify the exact species, since the tree hasn't flowered, we know that it belongs to the genus Commiphora, which is related to famous African plants, such as the myrrh tree. But time has revealed something even more special. Its leaves and resins are rich in compounds that have medicinal, antioxidant, and even skin-soothing properties. This means that the tree may represent a forgotten lineage whose resin had medicinal value and was mentioned in ancient texts. This brings to light how ancient people dealt with botanical medicine.
Something strange is lurking beneath the sands of Giza, and scientists have no idea what it is. Archaeologists just found a hidden structure near the Great Pyramid using advanced ground scanning technology. What's inside? Nobody knows, but excavations are already underway. The Great Pyramid of Giza is one of the most famous monuments on Earth, but it doesn't stand alone. It's surrounded by an ancient necropolis, a massive royal graveyard filled with tombs and monuments. They belong to pharaohs, nobles, and other high-ranking officials. Most of these tombs are above the ground. They're called mastabas, rectangular, flat-roofed tombs built from limestone or mud brick, and they've been studied for decades. But from old movies, we know that these weren't simple graves. They have deep vertical shafts leading to underground burial chambers, where the past was sealed away for eternity. And recently, archaeologists found one curious empty space in the cemetery, a completely unexplored patch of ground. No mastabas, no visible ruins, nada. For years they ignored it, but between 2021 and 2023, they decided to investigate. They didn't dig, though. Instead, they used a technology that kind of acts like X-rays for the ground. These radars let scientists see the secrets hidden there. And there was something hidden beneath the sand, something deliberately buried and forgotten. A two-part underground structure. One part was shallow and L-shaped. It's about 33 feet long and buried just 6.5 feet deep. But below that, a deeper, more mysterious anomaly. A structure completely different from anything else in the area. They called it a highly resistive anomaly, which means it's dense and solid, likely made of stone, sand, or even metal. And still, no one has a clue what's inside it. Now, it's clear that humans made the L shape. It wasn't formed by nature. And the shallower structure might have been an entrance to whatever is hidden below. But they only have some theories about what might be hidden there. It's also filled with sand and gravel. It was probably deliberately backfilled after its construction, perhaps to preserve this. Why? Well, we don't know yet. The archaeological team will need to excavate to understand what exactly this thing was and why it was built. The first guess is a lost burial chamber. Many tombs in Giza have underground burial sites, but most have clear surface markers. This one, for some reason, has nothing. But it could be one of them. The second guess is an ancient offering chapel. Egyptologists know that some chapels were built in this shape, but usually they were above ground, not buried like this. And finally, it might be something we've never seen before. If this turns out to be a new type of structure, it could rewrite what we know about the burials of pharaohs. The only way to know for sure is to dig it up. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Excavations are already underway. Archaeologists are racing against time to uncover the truth. But there's a real danger there too. Giza's fragile ancient structures need to be handled carefully. Otherwise, they could be damaged beyond repair. So all we can do is wait for the truth. Now, these tombs always held fascinating mysteries. Unfortunately, we'll never learn tons of these mysteries because of some relentless tomb robbers. Egyptian tombs were built to guard the bodies for eternity. But that absolutely didn't stop people from breaking in and stealing everything valuable inside. They've been bothering these ancient sites for thousands of years, starting way back in pharaohs' times. Many of the most famous tombs, including those in Giza, Saqqara, and the Valley of the Kings, were looted. It was a common practice in ancient Egypt. And they were serious about this whole thing. They dug secret tunnels to bypass traps and walls, bribed or threatened tomb workers to get inside knowledge, cracked open sarcophagi to grab gold, jewelry, and artifacts. And by the time modern archaeologists got to most of these tombs, they had already been picked clean. The reigning pharaohs got tired of this infuriating nonsense. The Valley of the Kings, the famous burial ground of Egyptian royalty, was supposed to be the ultimate safe zone. Tombs were built deep underground, hidden in the desert. Passages were sealed with giant stone blocks. False doors and traps were added to confuse thieves. Even curses were written on the walls, warnings of horrible endings for anyone who dared to disturb the tomb, which is exactly where we got all those horror stories about mummies from. Spoiler alert, none of it worked. Most tombs in the Valley of the Kings were fully robbed within 100 years of being sealed. Even King Tutankhamun's tomb, one of the most famous in history, was broken into twice in ancient times. Some of them decided to try and fight back. The New Kingdom rulers built hidden unmarked tombs in a way that should have prevented the looters from finding them, but didn't work. Some pharaohs, like Ramses II, were moved in secret to prevent their bodies from being stolen. Nope, didn't matter. The grave robbers always won. That's because tomb raiders weren't just random thieves. They were skilled, organized, and well-connected. They knew exactly where to look. Many were the ones who had built these sites in the first place, and they knew where the entrances were. If they couldn't smash through the doors, they'd dig through the walls, floors, and even ceilings to break inside. They also worked fast, often within a few years after the tombs were sealed, before anyone forgot where the valuable stuff was. The Khufu's pyramid, the one that's next to this newly discovered structure, was looted long before modern times. The one thing left inside when explorers got there? An empty granite box where the sarcophagus used to be. Unfortunately, it's not just about gold. History itself gets stolen during these raids. Ancient Egyptians wrote detailed records of what exactly and where they buried. So when archaeologists compare these lists to what's found, they can see what's missing, which is often everything valuable. Most artifacts don't end up in museums. They just disappear into private collections, where they can never be studied again. Which is, of course, completely unfair. In fact, a few countries have had enough and started passing laws to take historical artifacts back from private collectors. In Italy, if you own an ancient Roman artifact, you must prove you got it legally. China is actively hunting down stolen artifacts, and they must find ways to retrieve it back from the Western collectors. In Egypt, they passed new laws making it illegal for private citizens to own any ancient Egyptian artifacts at all. Other countries, like the US, the UK, Germany, or Switzerland, are completely fine with rich guys owning their history. The British Museum is built on looted things. European empires invaded half the planet and took whatever they wanted back home. Their museums are often full of such stolen artifacts, and unfortunately, they refuse to give most of them back. For example, the Rosetta Stone. It was taken from Egypt by Napoleon's army, then stolen again by the British after they beat the French. Egypt has been demanding to return for years, but they still can't get it back. Or the Parthenon marbles. These magnificent massive Greek structures were taken from the Parthenon in Athens by a British lord in the 19th century. Greece has been begging for them back ever since, but the UK doesn't feel like it. Not to mention tons of Mesoamerican artifacts scattered in various museums across the world. European explorers raided Mayan and Aztec temples, took statues, jewelry, and sacred objects, and now Mexico is fighting to get them back. Well, wouldn't it be surprising even if this mysterious underground chamber has somehow been looted already? But if it's a newly found place, could it be one of the few that escaped the hands of grave robbers? Could there still be ancient artifacts, untouched for 4,500 years? We can only hope that those guys didn't get there first. Secant, cosine, tangent, sine, 3.14159. Yeah, that was the cheer we heard coming from the trigonometry club back in the day. For the rest of us in math class, terms such as sine, tangent, and pi were just bewildering. Who invented these and why? Was their only purpose to make it harder for students? Well, not quite. Trigonometry was invented by the ancient Egyptians. They needed this knowledge to construct pyramids, and they did a pretty good job too. The Great Pyramid in Giza still stands today, some 4,500 years after it was built. No recalls either. So let's get out of that classroom and on a journey through time to reveal the secrets behind the ancient Egyptians' precision. Here you are, standing on the Great Pyramid's construction site, some 9 miles from Cairo. Well, the city still isn't there, as you're surrounded only by the desert and teams of construction workers. They're transporting large stone blocks weighing 2.5 tons each. They're inside a wooden sled that sits on large rollers. A crew of 8 men rolls these blocks along the ground. You immediately think of the rollers on a supermarket cash register. The principle is exactly the same, but the scale is greater, much greater. Scientists estimate that the Egyptians used 2.3 million such blocks in the Great Pyramid alone. And the block in front of you is one of the lighter ones. The heaviest of them weighed up to 15 tons. But where did all these blocks come from? Most of them originated from quarries around Giza. It's not that impressive, you think, but wait until you hear how ancient engineers transported the granite used in construction over 500 miles to the pyramid. There were no railways or highways back then, but the mighty Nile was always there. Researchers even believe that the Egyptians dug a canal to connect the Nile directly to the pyramid's construction site. All they had to do then was to wait for the flood season to begin, and voila! The rising water levels floated the heavy stone blocks for them. But how did they lift the enormous stones on dry land to stack them up to the top? Did they use oversized cranes? Well, ancient Egyptians worked around this problem, literally speaking. One of the workers is now pointing to the giant ramp going around the pyramid they're building. This is how a mountain road zigzags its way to the top. If the ramp went directly to the top of the pyramid, then workers couldn't pull the stone blocks along it. It would be too steep. Scientists have calculated that 8% could be the maximum incline. So ancient Egyptians just extended the ramp around the pyramid. Again, these are all theories, as the ramp could have been inside the pyramid, as some researchers suggest. The exact building method is still a mystery, guarded by the Sphinx. That's its real name, right? Wrong. As the Great Sphinx is just the statue's alias. You know, the name writers take when they want to hide their true identity, or a singer's stage name. The Sphinx's real name, translated from Egyptian, means Horus in the horizon. That was the name for the Egyptian deity of the sky. The trail of mystery doesn't end there, as a man walks past you with a bucket of paint. He's going to add a touch of color to the Great Sphinx. Researchers found specks of this red color next to its ear. That was some strong paint, as it survived for thousands of years. You are now standing straight in front of the Sphinx. You look up. It's very tall, right? 66 feet to be precise. Now resist the urge to take a selfie. You can do it. Now you notice something else. It looks like the Sphinx is in the center of a giant triangle in the back. That's one side of the Great Pyramid. And no, your eyes are not playing tricks on you. The Sphinx really does sit in the center of the pyramid's lateral face. Here's where math comes in handy. A pyramid has 4 sides, called lateral faces. There's also a 5th face, the base, but that's not visible. It's, wait for it, face down. The Sphinx has one last mystery to reveal: its age. Scientists agree that Pharaoh Khafre built the Sphinx. He ruled after his father, who had built a great pyramid nearby. So both structures were finished around the same time. Let's talk about numbers again. You've heard of Cleopatra, the Egyptian princess described as a woman of great beauty.
Hello?
She saw the pyramids, but she lived closer to the time of the first iPhone than the time of the people who built the pyramids. Fascinating, right? You can see thousands of people around you. They're working hard to build the pharaoh's tomb. But how many of them are there exactly? One Greek philosopher estimated there were as many as 100,000 workers. Seems like an okay number for such an enormous structure, but it can't be true. Science simply can't back up this number. Egyptologists put the total number of workers at 30,000. And yes, Indiana Jones was one of them, at least on the big screen, but he showed up late. Egyptologists know a lot about the pyramids, but not everything. Not because they don't want to, but because they haven't yet dug up enough evidence. They can only guess how the building process went. First, engineers would arrive to choose the right spot and do the necessary measurements. That's why they needed all that complicated math. Then, it's time for sourcing the material, the large stone blocks I mentioned earlier. When boats deliver them to the site of the future pyramid, workers can finally do their thing. They operated in smaller groups, but there were at least 2,000 of them chiseling and carving away at any given time. Sounds like a typical construction site today? Well, that's because it is, just thousands of years ago. It's amazing what ancient Egyptians were able to achieve with just copper and stone tools. The pyramid is now complete in front of you. But is it the same pyramid we see today? Why is this structure shining bright in the desert sun? Isn't it supposed to be a dusty yellow color? Well, no. Human activity and the elements have completely stripped the outer layer of stones over time. Expert craftspeople polished these blocks using nothing but stone and sand. The end result was a smooth and shiny rock. On the day it was completed, the Great Pyramid of Giza was a perfect triangle of light. Its polished sides acted like giant mirrors, reflecting the powerful Egyptian sun. This is the point where you should put your glasses on, and that shiny thing you see at the pyramid's very top is actually gold. The capstone at the top of the pyramid is called a pyramidion. It was covered in sheets of gold. As you can guess, these were the first stones to disappear. Let's make another stop before we get you back to your classroom. We travel to the British Isles, and no, Stonehenge isn't our destination. It is Newgrange in County Meath. Scientists estimate that the ancient peoples of Ireland built this stone monument around the year 3200 BCE. This makes it older than both Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid in Giza. The function of the circular mound in Newgrange is the same as the one of the Great Pyramid and equally mysterious. The estimated amount of loose stone present in the valley is over 220,000 tons. And it's not just randomly thrown on a pile. The order in which the stones are set makes the structure water-resistant. That would explain how Newgrange had survived for so long. Kinda makes you want to splash out the cash for that waterproof phone case, huh? Well, you're back in your school desk, but today's math lecture is the last thing on your mind. You're thinking about how great the Egyptian pyramids are, and if we have something similar today. It turns out modern engineers are just as impressed with the Great Pyramid as you are. There's a glass pyramid sitting in the main courtyard of the famous Louvre Museum in Paris. The panorama of San Francisco wouldn't be complete without the 48-story Transamerica Pyramid. But Las Vegas went the furthest. There we find the Luxor Hotel. It's so big that it's the third largest pyramid on the planet. And guess what's in front of it? Yup, a replica of the Sphinx. It's 110 feet tall, 2 stories higher than the one in Giza. Yeah, everything's bigger in Vegas.
It's 1898, and you're taking part in excavations in Saqqara. This place, not far away from Cairo, is full of ancient tombs and pyramids. You're in your Indiana Jones mood and hope to find something really phenomenal to become famous. Gold, manuscripts, treasure maps, mummies of famous pharaohs. Wait, a wooden bird? You're really disappointed as it looks like a regular toy. An old one, but still. Little do you know that years later, someone would propose that your bird was actually an ancient monoplane. So the artifact, nicknamed the Saqqara bird, is made of a sycamore tree. The birdie has a wingspan of just 7 inches and weighs around 40 grams. A perfect original souvenir from Egypt, I would say. It's over 2,000 years old and looks pretty plain, without any carvings of feathers or other intricate ornaments. It has a beak and eyes though, which makes our find look like a hawk, the emblem of the deity Horus. Its tail is rather unusual as it's squared, looks weirdly upright, and it seems like the sunken part of it was the place for a now missing piece. Humans love solving a good mystery, so there have been several attempts to explain the use of the birdie. First, quite simply, is that it was a ceremonial object. The second idea is that it was a toy for a child from some well-off family. It could have been some sort of boomerang, which was a popular concept in ancient Egypt. Then there was a theory that the bird had been used as a weather vane. But this one has been debunked as the figure doesn't have any holes or markings, except for the one made at the museum in Cairo to fix the exhibit on a stick. So there was no way to hang it in the past. Almost a century after the bird was found, Egyptologist Dr. Khalil Masiha proposed a new theory that it could have been a model of a monoplane. He believed the bird was missing a horizontal tailplane. Otherwise, it had its wings set at a right angle, similar to that of modern planes. It could have worked to generate the aerodynamic lift necessary for flights. Dr. Masiha also claimed that it was common at that time to place miniature models of technological inventions in tombs. So, did the ancient Egyptians really invent the plane in 200 BCE? That would make the Wright brothers, who are considered the inventors of aviation, really upset. They made one of their first flights only in 1903. There's just one way to know for sure, and that is to test the model. But you know, the ancient museum in Cairo would unlikely let one of their cherished exhibits fly around like a toy. That's why glider designer Martin Gregory built a similar model, this time of balsa wood, and concluded that even with the missing tailplane, the plane wasn't much of a flyer. Case solved? Not really. This didn't sound convincing enough to the History Channel, so they invited an aerodynamics expert to build another replica of the bird. He tested it in weather conditions similar to those in Egypt and was impressed with the little plane's abilities. So, if they did invent the prototype of a plane back in the times of pharaohs, it would be a good example of an oupart. That's an out-of-place artifact, an object that's way ahead of its time in terms of technology or history. And the Saqqara bird isn't the only example of such a revolutionary concept. In 1901, a group of divers retrieved the Antikythera mechanism from an underwater shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera. It's been dubbed the world's first analog computer, and it's currently dated around 100 BCE. The bronze mechanism could tell the position of the sun, moon, planets, and stars, as well as the lunar phase, the dates of upcoming solar eclipses, and even the speed at which the moon moves through the sky. No one's sure who used it and how or where it was made. But it's obvious that it's extremely precise and way too advanced for its time. The first flushing toilets in the world were invented in the middle of the 20th century. Just kidding. The ancient Minoans on the Mediterranean island of Crete and the Indus Valley civilization both came up with this brilliant invention at the same time, around 4,000 years ago. The plumbing and sanitation were so well done that no one managed to design anything better until 2,000 years later. One ancient Minoan lavatory was discovered at the Palace of Knossos. It looks like it had a wooden seat set over a tunnel that directed water from a rooftop reservoir to an underground sewer. Other varieties got water from jugs. Only the super rich people could afford all this glory. So if you wanted to shop for real estate back then, the flushing toilet would be a telltale sign you were in the rich neighborhood. Automated doors became a cool, seemingly new invention back in 1931. But the technology behind them is actually much older. Think the 1st century CE old. Mathematician and engineer Heron of Alexandria came up with a hydraulic system to open and close temple doors. To bring it into action, you need to light a fire to produce heat. There was a brass pot under the fire, half filled with water. The inventor connected the brass pot to containers that acted as weights. When the fire was burning, the water moved into the containers. They went down and pulled the ropes. It was nothing like a supermarket door that opens in front of you before you even have time to think. Heron's door took hours to open, and there was no way to stop the process. That's why they only opened the doors once a day before people entered the temple, to add some mysticism at the temple during ceremonies. Spooky. Looks like the first ever battery was invented in Baghdad around 2,000 years ago. A German archaeologist found this oval-shaped clay jar in 1938. Scientists are still not sure what purpose it served and who exactly invented it. There is a theory that it was used for electroplating objects with precious metals. When they filled it with a weak acid like vinegar, the battery produced around 1 volt of electricity. Another theory says it was a vessel for sacred scrolls. Would you like to buy contact lenses designed by Leonardo da Vinci himself? In 1508, he invented a glass lens with a funnel on one side. You were supposed to wear it with water inside to improve your vision. Sounds a bit uncomfortable, doesn't it? So, around a century later, French scientist René Descartes decided to improve the idea and make the cornea contact the future lenses. Contacts because they contact your eyes, get it? The glass tube with liquid did help improve vision, but blinking was sadly impossible. 2.5 centuries later, new technologies in the glass industry let scientists design contacts that would fit in the eye and even let the wearer blink. Thanks, guys! Still, those lenses were made of heavy blown glass and didn't let the eye breathe. About 50 years later, contacts became plastic, lightweight, unbreakable, and scratch-resistant, but still covering the entire eye. And then, in 1948, an English optical technician accidentally sanded down a plastic lens and figured out they'd still be in place even if they covered only the cornea. Imagine you're living in 19th century London and need to send a message to New York. It would have taken about 10 days to get there by ship. So when delivery time went from days to hours in 1858, it was a true sensation. The first message was sent by Queen Victoria herself. It was all made possible thanks to the transatlantic telegraph cable, running under the ocean. Sadly, the new cool invention only lasted a few weeks. It took years to bring it back to life.